Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement Channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the topics of empowerment, equality, and exploitation. Feminists love using terms like empowerment and empowering and equality and equals to describe things that they want. But yet, these things are reserved for women and are not amenities afforded to men. Men do not get the same empowerment or equality that women do. So it is not actually equality because, otherwise, how could women be more equal than men? And when feminists use the term exploitative, they are referring, of course, to something they do not want, that they are saying men do to women, or that men experience that puts them at an advantage and women at a disadvantage, right? So exploitative work practices would be how a feminist, could use that in a sentence to refer to practices in the workplace that favor men and put them in advantageous positions over women. Yet, there are a plethora of ways in which women exploit men and feel as though they should be able to because they find it empowering. So there's no equality for men. In fact, men are not even allowed to be empowered in ways that women are not. The standard is this: if something allows women to benefit from men, or women to benefit and men not to, it is called empowering. If something allows men to benefit from women, or men to benefit and women not to, it is called exploitation. Men are simply not granted the same permissions to do these things as women are. They are not allowed to do the very things that women love to do and find so, quote, empowering. And women are allowed to exploit men because it is empowering to them. And if there is ever a situation in which a man is at an advantage and a woman is at a disadvantage, there's a political outrage about it, and the man is labeled as an oppressor when it is actually the men who are being oppressed. And this double standard of women playing the victim and claiming to be so disempowered and exploited is the vehicle they use to make their power grabs with which they oppress us. A woman marrying a richer man and then divorcing him and taking more money than she came with so that she can be more independent is empowering. A man doing the same thing is seen as exploitative. A woman deciding that she wants to get an abortion due to irresponsible sexual decisions and saying that Big Daddy government should pay for it is empowering. But a man who suggests his girlfriend get an abortion when they have a surprise pregnancy and not even offering to pay for it is exploitative. A woman who stops taking her birth control without telling her man so that she can get pregnant by him without his consent and then deciding to be a single mother and keep the child from him is empowering. But a man who pokes a hole in a condom to get a girl pregnant is exploitative. Additionally, men who are against women being able to take men's money in divorce, against abortion, against prostitution, and other careers that objectify women are also seen as being exploitative towards women. And when it comes to paternity, the double standard is that if a man wants to have power of decision making and be in control of the finances and such, that is him being patriarchal. But when a woman tries to control him, if he doesn't do what she wishes or provide her enough, she will accuse him of not being paternal enough. It is a double standard that leaves men with no power and no equality. We are being exploited. There's another example of these double standards that runs far deeper, though. That is what happens when men and women are trying to profit off of their sex appeal. For when a woman profits off of her sex appeal by becoming a model, pornographer, or a sex worker, it is seen as empowering for her. But men who use pornography or prostitutes are seen as objectifying women and being misogynistic and creepy or perverted. And what happens when a man like myself tries to become a model, pornographer, or sex worker? Well, that is not seen as empowering. And in fact, the chances are that they will not be able to be successful because the industry hires a small fraction of the men that it does women. So not only are fewer men getting hired, but the standards for those men that do get hired are far higher. And they are judged far more and far more harshly than women in the industry are. And thus they are being objectified more. Okay? The men who do get hired are objectified more than women are ever objectified by men. I know because I'm in the porn industry. This is an industry in which women feel it is appropriate to speak publicly about a man's penis size being too small if she feels that it is, right? But when it comes to the women in the industry, they want body positivity, right? And you wouldn't be allowed to say that a woman's pussy looks, loose and flappy, or that a woman is fat and unattractive, right? Because that would be sexist. And feminists obviously have no problem with male models being objectified and even body shamed. Now, interestingly, recently during the 2021 Olympics, feminists released an article saying that men shouldn't be looking at the female athletes sexually, which is ironic because their physical training makes them some of the top physical specimens in the world. That is what the Olympics is for. So, of course, they would have great sex appeal. So why would we be told by feminists to deny this and any attraction we might have to the most physically perfect female specimens on the planet? It is even more ironic because there was also another article released by women around the same time on male attractiveness, judging men by the most impossibly high physical standards, and was literally the most objectifying thing I have ever read. It was horrifying to read as a man. So feminists obviously have no problem with women objectifying men. And yet, while men who make their money off of their looks get objectified more than women, they also get paid a fraction of the amount that women do for doing the same work, or even doing more work than them. In fact, most women feel as though they shouldn't have to pay for porn, and also wouldn't buy sex toys from a male sex toy vendor either, and also wouldn't pay for a sensual or sexual massage from a male masseuse or sex worker, and feel that just him getting to touch her in a way that is sensual or sexual, maybe not even sexual, maybe just sensual, should be enough compensation for him to want to give her the massage for free. And there's plenty of other products that women will not buy from men either, and things that men have to pay for that women say that they would never pay for, that society or that men should provide to them for free. And there's professions that men do not do as good as women in. For instance, I used to sell women's shoes, but women seem to want to buy their shoes primarily from other women. So the top salespeople were women, who had to put in very little effort to make sales, and also had no qualms about being cutthroat and sharky and stealing commissions. And meanwhile, I was busting my ass trying to make sales, working with the female customer base as a male, and ended up making below the poverty line, going into debt with the company because we worked on what was called a commissioned draw. So that means that I had to earn my base pay in commissions before I started earning commissions on top of that. So every week I had to sell enough shoes to compensate for my base pay before I would start making commissions on top of that. And if I didn't, I would go into debt with the company and would owe them that much more the next week. And as an entry-level employee, the base pay was minimum wage, which is not a living wage. It puts you below the poverty line, and you have to then seek out social services and charities to get your basic needs met, right? So I had taken a commission sales position with the assumption that making commissions would put me, well above that, and that I would be earning much more than the base pay, when in actuality, I was earning less and going into debt with the company simply because of the fact that I was a man selling female products to women who didn't want to buy female products from a man. And obviously you could see the injustice here and how I'm at a obvious disadvantage, and that there is obvious bias that could be called sexism in the workplace that I was working at, and yet it was no one's fault that women didn't want to buy female shoes from me. The company wasn't breaking any laws by offering me a commission on a draw, by offering me a commission draw, as it was called, and I had made a conscious adult decision to take this specific position. And, like with the argument about the wage gap, and how women are just taking positions that, aren't lucrative, we could say, yeah, I have to take responsibility for that. But when women are in these positions, there's affirmative action for them. And there was no affirmative action for me or any other men like me, and no support from my company, my community, politics, nothing. And yet, again, feminists and women in general do get these kinds of supports from society. And yet they have no problem with men being in these same positions where they are experiencing inequality and injustice. When men who are doing the same exact jobs as women are getting paid less for doing more work. Even though feminists claim they want there to be equal pay between the sexes, they obviously do not. They have had no calls for affirmative action for men in industries that are female dominated, like the women's shoe stores or porn and modeling, where women get paid far more for doing much less work and have much more favorable working conditions, and exponentially more of them are getting hired than men. Where's feminism to talk about equality then? The same paradigm is seen in both the professional world and the world of dating, relationships, and marriage, and basically anywhere else in society where men and women are interacting, such as the world of politics. Women expect affirmative action and to have to contribute less than men and have men provide for them. In the world of relationships and marriage, a successful man can take a poor woman and build her up, but women do not do the same for men. A successful woman would never even give a poor man the time of day as a suitor in dating. In fact, not only do women not build men up, but they actually break them down and mine them for resources to extract from them. And what happens to the women that the successful men build up? Well, as soon as the women become the men's equals or begin to even outperform them a little at times, they lose interest in the man. And if a woman's husband, who she once called her life partner and vowed to be with till death do them part, goes into a low when she's experiencing a high in life, she will do nothing to help build him back up, but rather she will just lose interest in him and probably just divorce him. In fact, women are not even interested in men when they are at an equal level of success. Women's attractiveness is hypergamous and based upon the man being significantly superior to her and having more to offer than she does to him. And when that stops being the case, they lose interest. 80+% of divorces are initiated by women, and often it is due to no fault of the man. That is why they had to invent no-fault divorce law, right? It's just simply because she's no longer attracted to him, because he is no longer that much more her superior. Once a man becomes a woman's equal or lesser, she leaves him for an even higher status man. This is what is called hypergamy. The richest man in the world was a self-starter who married a less successful woman and then made her the richest woman in the world, who got her money by marrying and divorcing him. And this is not an isolated incident, but is exemplary. I've been thinking about the supposed equality that is said to exist between men and women a lot lately. My last girlfriend liked to think of herself as a strong, independent woman and kept telling me that we were equals, but yet I was giving 90 to 95% or even more than that to the relationship and was lucky to get 10% back from her at maximum when she, had more to give than usual or felt like giving me more than usual. In fact, on average, it was really more like 3 or maybe 5% at best. And sometimes it would actually be like 100% me and 0% her. And I would have to be constantly nagging her about the fact that she wasn't doing anything she said she would and was making me do everything. Keep in mind that we were not just a couple who, thought of ourselves as life partners, but we were also business partners. So it was very problematic on the professional front that she was not doing any of her work as my partner in a business that we had created together. And I was ending up having to do all the work with double the workload. And eventually I had to realize that this was a pattern, not a series of mistakes. And so it wasn't going to change. It was just going to continue to repeat over and over like that. That she just wasn't willing or able to do or give to me and the relationship what I did to her and the relationship. So I started wondering, how exactly is it that we are equals, if at all? I did all of the cooking and cleaning, and even when she would try to help, I would end up just having to help her do what she was doing or re-clean things that she had cleaned already afterwards because she would leave them still quite disgusting. She wasn't capable of having intellectual conversations with me, even about the topics that she herself brought up and, said that she valued and thought about. Our conversations were always one-sided, with me, contributing all the value, doing all of the talking. And when it came to communicating about serious relationship-oriented things and doing relationship work, again, I was the one doing all of the communicating and relationship work, and she would do none of it. When it came to responsibility and reliability, again, I was the only one who had any responsibility or dependability in the relationship. And she almost never even followed through on any of the things she said she was going to do. It was less than 10% of the time that her word actually meant anything. When we had business projects together, even if it was her idea that would fulfill her goals and dreams, I would be doing almost all of the work, more than 95% of it. And she wouldn't even be able to do the bare minimum, such as printing out and signing legal documents and forms she needed to get in. And when it came to our financial situation, she was at an advantage. I was at a disadvantage. She had a day job with a steady paycheck that she got, and I don't. And I think she might have made perhaps slightly more than me on that because, it was something that she had a degree for, but then of course she had student debt. However, she had fewer expenses than me and relied upon people like me and her parents to, meet a lot of her needs. So she didn't have to do it herself by paying for things. And even though she had fewer expenses, and was making good money, she seemed to have more money troubles than me. And I ended up paying for everything in the relationship. She never paid for anything. And when it came to support and caregiving, again, it was more than 90% me giving and her giving less than 10%. As our conversations were always focused on me giving her emotional support and coaching for every tiny little thing that went wrong in her life, when I myself had many more larger problems burdening me, which she never offered me hardly any moral support with whatsoever. And I could hardly depend upon her to help me relax and unwind because I was always having to help her with her minor problems that she would turn into much bigger issues than they were. And last but not least, I'm going to be brutally honest with you here. In the bedroom, she was a very selfish lover. And we get multiple orgasms each time we had sex. Well, I was lucky to have just one. And she barely ever did much for my pleasure. She did the bare minimum. I could communicate about my likes and dislikes and would mostly get ignored. And even when it came to thoughtfulness and consideration and affection and romance and love, I was mostly the giver and she was the taker. So across the board, she would take and not give, yet would always assert that we were equals. When she would not take care of my needs and I would bring it up, she would just suggest that I date other women as well, so that I could find some others who would meet the needs that she wasn't meeting, rather than her stepping up to the plate. But then she would say that since we were equals, she would also have to see other men, specifically one man for every woman I was seeing. So notice how suddenly equality becomes an important thing to her, and it needs to be tit for tat. So this doesn't seem like equality to me, because I was doing everything she needed of me, and she was doing almost nothing I needed of her. Not even the things she offered to and said she was going to do. Not even things she signed in legally binding contracts. Eventually, this imbalance, or in other words, inequality, caused the relationship to collapse. Just like a mountain that had been mined for resources until it had been hollowed out so much that it collapsed. So had I by an exploitative woman who took everything she could from me until she had completely depleted me. And then, when my usefulness had been diminished and I had no more left to give, and demanded that she start making good on her promises and that I'd be able to get the profit that I was due for the work that I did and investments that I made, what do you think she did? She left me. She even violated our legal professional contract that we had between us in multiple ways, multiple violations. And not only did she violate that, not only did she violate the contract, but she also violated my very rights that she herself claimed were important to her to have. And we ended up in court over all of this, and it didn't go my way. And I suppose I should feel lucky that I was not married to her, otherwise it could have been so much worse. I could have ended up with like 80% or more of the men out there who get half of their assets or more taken from them by greedy women. And my breakup with this last girl, which was not an isolated incident and, just one of a series, has had me thinking a lot over the past year or two about equality and gender relations because of the fact that, this is just one more case in a long pattern. Over the past 25 years of my life, I have dated woman after woman, and it always seems to be the exact same set of problems with female behavior. I will have one serious relationship about every year or two that will last, at least a couple few months or more before it implodes due to this equality and power imbalance. And before I went MGTOW, I would date lots of women in between relationships who didn't even claim or try to be equals. So that would be the big reason why we didn't end up in a relationship. There was just never that equality necessary to create a balanced partnership between us. That is what is needed for a healthy and sustainable relationship. And it's not because I'm dating the same exact type of woman every time. I've dated across many demographics and cultures, yet it is always the same. The relationships are about a 90-10 split. The women take but do not give. all of the responsibility falls upon me and none upon them. I can't even trust that their word means anything when they give it to me about something they are going to do. And before it had been going on for so long with such consistency, when it used to happen to me, I would think that I just had a bad experience with a bad girl, and that it was an isolated incident. But this has happened with so many different types of women at this point that I'm beginning to think that this is just the way women are, and that it is female nature. They say they are our equals, but yet their behaviors tell a different story and make it seem like they actually aren't. In fact, it seems more like they are our exploiters. And this would make sense because of the social science theory that women are hypergamous, or that they date up and use men for their resources. So this means that men like me end up in these situations because women do not want equality. Women are not attracted to their equals, they are attracted to superiority. The relationships they enter are not with men that are their equals, but their superiors. And if the man stops being their superior over time and becomes more like their equal, or less, which will often happen as she depletes him of his resources and usefulness, well, she will lose interest and leave him, usually without so much as even giving him an explanation. As we know these days, ghosting someone is all too common. This experience has not just been isolated to dating and relationships either. Whenever I have female friends, they're constantly having me help them with things and never offer me anything in return. And in business, it is probably worse. When I have had female employees, colleagues, and affiliates, I can barely count on them to show up for work or meetings. Even when it is an affiliate who I am offering a free promotion of their work for, the women barely ever show up. I was an equal opportunity employer for so long and did my best to work with 50% women, but was unable to because I ended up having to invest way too much time in headhunting trying to find good female help that would actually show up. You could actually depend upon for them to, make good on their obligations. And, I was just unable to find very many women who could do that. However, in my entire work history, I only ever had one man reschedule at the last minute, ever. The men were always dependable. And when I did work with women, the work that they did was often of poor quality. And I would end up having to do tons of work on their work to try to bring it up to par, which cost me a lot of time, energy, and money. And even then, I would often not feel good about how it made my company look. And I never had this problem with men. And I've heard the same from male friends of mine, that they have to give extra time and energy to help the women they work with do their work, which they cannot do on their own. Yet these women get paid the same as men, while doing less work and needing men to help them to do portions of their work for them. Women want affirmative action and workplace support of male colleagues and employers because they do not want to be held to the same standards of workload and quality as men are. But yet they want equal pay, because they are exploiting us, just as they do in relationships with us and getting us to do all of the relationship work and to contribute more money to the relationship as well for the shared life you are building that they happen to be doing most of the decision making about, and seems to be more about you funding their ideal lifestyle than them supporting you with your dreams. So to wrap this up here, I'm going to ask you a serious question now, and I want you to think about it very hard and consider all of your past experiences and give a thoughtful answer. And this is not rhetorical. This is not something I want you to just think to yourself. I want you to actually answer me in the comments below. All right, and this is not time for being politically correct about sexism or anything like that. I want to know, for real, honestly and objectively, in your life experience, are women really the equals of you men out there? And if so, what exactly is it that makes them equal? For if we are in fact equals, as feminists and women in general say, I cannot see what it is that makes us that. Because when it comes to honesty and integrity, communication and language, thoughtfulness and consideration, responsibility and reliability, effort and energy, work and professional skill, domestic abilities, money management, relationship skills, sexual ability, and pleasure giving. I haven't seen any equality or anything even close to it in any of these areas in the way that women have related to me or really any of the men I have known. It hasn't been equality. It has been exploitation. Like I said, it's always 90-10 at best, and that's very best. At worst, it will be even as bad as 100-0, in which the woman basically feels as though her fleeting presence is enough in the relationship, and has me taking care of her as if she is a small child and I'm her father. So if there are areas that women excel at that do make them their equal, what are they then? Because none of them have made any appearances in any of my relationships with women yet, or the relationships I've studied as a social scientist. And I know what the misandrists are going to say in response to this. If there's any man-hating feminists out there, they're going to say, you are attracting these women for a reason, because there's something wrong with you. Because that is all I've heard when I try to get relationship advice from the gynocentric community, in which, men are always wrong and women are always right. So as a man, you can't complain about being exploited by women without being victim blamed. So now I'm supposed to believe that being a good man and having a lot to offer a woman and thus getting taken advantage of by them is a fault. That is somehow my fault. That I'm the one at fault for getting taken advantage of, exploited, and victimized by a bad woman. No, that is called victim blaming. And if you would like to read more about that and the other forms of misandry or female on male sexism, click the link below to check out my expose on misandry. That this video was actually a reading from, just one part of. So that is very valuable content for you men out there in your journey of liberation from women's sexism and oppression of us, a lot of which you may not even realize and need to be made aware of, which is why I wrote this expose. So make sure that you check that out. Again, it is linked below. And otherwise, that concludes this video. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things as well. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine personal development and living the life you want to as an independent man. And stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be on the topic of sacrifice. And make sure you subscribe so you'll be notified when that is. And until then, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.